rainy day, Georgie feels like playing with a paper boat in the puddles. Bill, his older brother, who sometimes stutters, is sick in bed, not because he wants to accompany him, but still takes the time to make the boat for his little brother. Georgie thanks him with a hug and excitedly runs outside to play, unaware of what awaits him. Georgie leaves the boat in the water and follows it. Everything goes well until the boat is pulled toward the sewer. Worried, and thinking that Bill would be upset, Georgie bends down to try to recover it. But as he does, he sees a clown holding his boat and calling him by name. The clown, named Pennywise, asks him if he wants his boat back, and Georgie says yes. Meanwhile, an elderly woman sees the child in imminent danger, but indifferently she returns to her house. Pennywise tells Georgie that a storm brought his circus to the sewer, and mentions they have popcorn, knowing Georgie loves it. For a moment Georgie laughs and seems to trust the clown, but suddenly Pennywise changes, becomes serious, and scares Georgie. When Georgie tries to leave, Pennywise reminds him that Bill will be angry if he loses the boat. He offers it to him, but just as the boy is about to take it, the clown pulls him inside and bites him. It ripped his arm off. Georgie tries to escape, but at this point it seems impossible. This is the beginning of It, the remake from 2017, directed by Andy Muschietti, one of my favorite movies all time. I'm Lucifer Warren, and this is the manifestation of our deepest fears, the analysis of It. A year later, we see Mike, an orphan boy, with his grandfather on a farm. Mike gets nervous when he has to aim at a sheep. His grandfather notices his fear, takes control, and scolds him. He warns Mike that he must choose whether he wants to be in their position or the sheep's, because if he doesn't decide, someone else will. On the last day of school before the holidays, Bill, Richie, Stanley, and Eddie, called the losers, excitedly leave the school. However, a group of boys led by Bowers, who always bullies them, watches them with the intention of harassing them. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Beverly, a lonely girl suffering from an abusive father, is smoking a cigarette, and a group of girls takes the opportunity to throw trash on her. Outside the school, as Bill and his friends discuss their summer plans, they see Betty Ripson's mother standing outside the school, like everyone else, waiting for some sign of her daughter, who has been missing for weeks. Although some think Betty will never return, Bill, with his little brother in mind, insists that she is just missing. The situation becomes tense when Bowers' gang shows up. They start pushing Bill and his friends, mocking them. Bill, tired of the abuse, dares to insult them, and Bowers laughs at Bill's stuttering, telling him that this year he has left him alone because of what happened with Georgie. But that's over now, and just as Bowers is about to face Bill, Bowers decides to leave it for another day, but warns Bill and his friends that their summer will be tough. On the other side, Beverly, leaving school, meets Ben, the new kid in town. Ben is trying to avoid the bullies. She reassures him, telling him they went out through another door. Then Beverly jokes a little with Ben, and while introducing herself, takes his yearbook. She notices no one else has signed it, so she decides to do so. As he does, Ben stares at her, mesmerized. Bill arrives home, and his father is upset because Bill made a model of tunnels to understand where Georgie could have ended up. Bill is still affected by his little brother's disappearance, feeling guilty. However, his father, angry, tells him that Georgie is gone and asks him to take down the model before their mother sees it. Meanwhile, Mike is biking, delivering meat for a butcher shop. When he notices Bowers and his friends in the street, he quickly hides in an alley. Suddenly, seeing a door with chains, he starts seeing hands trying to escape from a fire and hears voices calling out. But the door finally opens, and there is Pennywise the clown, chained up and staring at Mike while making sheep noises. However, the vision is interrupted when Bowers and his gang show up, yelling at Mike to leave their town. On the other hand, Stanley is practicing reading the Torah, the Jewish sacred book, under the watchful eye of his father, Rabbi Uris. His father, disappointed, tells him he isn't studying enough, and asks him what others will think if the rabbi's son can recite correctly. Uris then asks him to put the book away. As Stanley enters the office, he tries to avoid looking at a painting on the wall that shows a woman with a flute, but when he puts the book on the shelf, the painting shakes. Stanley picks it up and realizes the woman has disappeared from the painting. He hears a noise, turns around, and finds the woman from the painting. But now she has a terrifying smile and monstrous teeth. Scared, Stanley runs away. Later, Bill and his friends are riding their bikes, determined to go to the sewer. Bill insists because he's determined to keep searching for Georgie. Meanwhile, Lonely Ben is at a bookstore, where he writes a poem for Beverly, and sees the group cycling together from his window. The librarian approaches Ben with a book he had requested about the history of Derry, the town, suggesting he take a break from reading during the summer. She tells him that during the holidays, kids usually hang out outdoors with their friends. Ben, annoyed, asks for the book. When he flips through it, he finds a newspaper clipping about a tragic explosion at a factory during Easter, resulting in the deaths of 88 children. As he continues flipping, he finds a disturbing image of the child's head in a tree. Startled, Ben slams the book shut and suddenly hears laughter. Turning around, he sees a red balloon floating in the bookstore. Following the balloon, he discovers burnt Easter eggs that lead him to a dark basement. The lights flicker and he hears the crunching of an egg. When he turns around, he sees a headless figure coming toward him from the stairs. He starts running, but when he looks back, he sees the frightening clown Pennywise. Just in time, the librarian enters and the hallucination fades. As Ben exits the bookstore, he bumps into Bowers and his gang who had been waiting for him. They drag him to a bridge where Bowers, with a knife, cuts a mark in the shape of his initial on Ben's stomach. While this happens, a car passes indifferently, and in the backseat, a red balloon can be seen. But Ben, gathering his courage, manages to hit Bowers and escapes into a nearby forest, reaching a river while Bowers' friends chase after him. Meanwhile, Bill and his friends are near the river, thinking about entering a tunnel. Eddie doesn't want to because it's full of dirty water. Eddie is the son of an overprotective mother who faced all his illnesses to control him, instilling in Eddie an excessive fear of contamination and sickness. On the ground, Bill finds a shoe that he believes belongs to the missing girl, Betty. But suddenly, they see Ben, injured, running toward them by the river and decide to pause their adventure and return to help him. However, behind him comes Patrick, one of Bauer's friends, who decides to enter the tunnel. Patrick encounters figures that look like zombies. Scared, he runs but gets lost and ends up in a dead alley. A balloon that says "I love Derry" appears, and when it pops, it reveals the dreaded clown Pennywise, who finishes off Patrick. The friends take Ben to seek help, although Eddie is nervous and fears they might catch some disease from the river. At the pharmacy, they grab supplies, but don't have enough money to pay. Luckily, they run into Beverly, who is buying tampons, and she decides to help them, distracting the pharmacist, who acts inappropriately toward her. Outside, Bill watches her hypnotized, recalling a school play where they shared a kiss, and invites her to join them the next day. When she gets home, Beverly's father inappropriately caresses her, asking her to say she is still his little girl. Distressed, the girl cuts her hair in the bathroom and watches it go down to drain. The next day, the friends, including Beverly, have fun at the cliff. While the girl suns herself, the boys can't stop staring at her. Later, Richie snoops in Ben's backpack and finds newspaper clippings about the town of Derry. They talk about a fire at a nightclub caused by a racist cult and other terrible events in the area. Richie asks about the numerous murders and disappearances in Derry, and Ben tells him the number is much higher than the national average, especially when it comes to children. The boys want to know more, so Ben invites them to his house to tell them what he's researched. There, he explains that 91 people signed the founding document of Derry and then disappeared that winter. Only bloodied clothes were found, leading to the house by the well. Bill wants to know where that house is, but Ben has no idea. He just thinks it's somewhere in the area. One day, Eddie passes by an old, scary wooden house. His alarm goes off, reminding him to take his medicine. But the door of the house opens, and a voice calls him. Eddie gets scared, drops his pills, and when he tries to pick them up, a leprous man corners him. Pennywise, the clown, appears with red balloons and invites him to join the others.
We'll float down here. Yes, we do.
Eddie screams in fear and the clown disappears. On the other side, Beverly finds the anonymous poem written by Ben and retreats to the bathroom to read it. She smiles as she does, but her joy is interrupted when she hears the faucet dripping, and soon after, hears voices emerging from the drain. Curious, Beverly puts a measuring tape in the hole, and when she pulls it out, a bunch of hair grabs her, and suddenly a stream of blood covers both her and the bathroom. The girl screams and her father arrives, but he doesn't see the blood. He only sees that Beverly cut her hair and, disgusted, tells her she looks like a boy. Meanwhile, Bill is woken up by a leak and gets up to find a bucket. As he passes George's room, he notices the light is on and decides to enter. There, he sees a toy that his brother had built and feels sad. Suddenly, he feels a presence and decides to follow it. In the kitchen, he sees a boy wearing Georgie's raincoat going to the basement. Bill follows him and finds Georgie, who says, "I lost it, Billy! Don't be mad, it went floating away, but you can float with me." Suddenly, Georgie disappears, and Pennywise the clown appears, but Bill manages to escape. The next day, Beverly shows the bathroom to the boys. because she thinks only they will see the bathroom full of blood. And she's right. Bill decides they need to clean it. And when they finish, Beverly tells Bill a verse from a poem, thinking he wrote it, but Bill tells her he's not good at writing poetry. Later, in the street, Bill tells the boys he saw Georgie and the clown. Eddie says he also saw it, and Ben and Stanley's faces show that they also saw it. Only Richie says he didn't see anything. Suddenly, they see Bauer's friend's car near Mike's bike. Beverly thinks they need to help, and they all run over. Mike is on the ground, being beaten by Bowers and his gang. When Bowers picks up a rock to hit Mike, Beverly stops him by throwing a stone at him. Then, hearing Bowers insult Beverly, Ben gets enraged and also throws a stone, triggering a fight between the group of losers and Bowers' gang. In the end, the losers win, and Bowers is left on the ground. And the unconscious, certain signifiers, words, or things have meanings that refer to personal traumas and fears. It's like when you hear a joke that plays on the double meaning of words. For example, soldier stand at attention, and the soldier responds, "Where do I sign, Captain?" Here the unconscious speaks, because the signifier or the word stand is interpreted unconsciously more as sign than as maintaining an upright posture. These jokes illustrate how the unconscious works according to Lacan. On an unconscious level, words can acquire meanings that are different from their original ones, depending on our experiences. Why did the soldier think of signing? So, going back to our comparison, both the unconscious, that which speaks, and the clown, that manifests unexpected connections between words and meanings, especially when these associations carry intense emotional weight. The clown, that, like the unconscious, presents itself to each child, revealing the deepest fears in their minds through connections with words or elements that unexpectedly link to personal traumas the kids can't directly express. And I'm going to give you 6 examples to help you understand better. For Bill, the drop of water in his house isn't just a drop falling. It refers to the trauma of the rainy day when his brother, Georgie, disappeared. The drop reignites the pain and guilt from losing his brother. And that's when that, whether you call it the clown or the unconscious, reveals itself. For Mike, the chains on the door and the sheep mean more than just that. On an unconscious level, the chains and fire evoke memories of racial oppression, discrimination, and the tragic loss of his parents, while the sheep symbolize a position of submission or vulnerability from this underlying meaning that manifests itself. For Stanley, when his father asks him to leave the book in the office, the boy avoids a picture of a woman who seems to be watching him. For Stanley, this picture is more than just a portrait. On an unconscious level, it reflects his feelings of inadequacy, shame, and fear of not meeting his father's expectations. The unexpected meaning of the picture triggers these feelings, and that's when that, or the unconscious, shows up for Ben. The librarian's question about whether he has friends evokes a sense of isolation in the boy. Additionally, the tragedy of the dead children amplifies his fear of premature death. Thus, through these underlying meanings, that, or the unconscious, manifests itself, revealing itself as a lonely zombie symbolizing isolation, and Easter eggs representing death in childhood. In Bev's case, her father shows an obsession with her hair, calling Bev his little girl. This hair, a symbol of femininity, represents the abuse she endures, especially when, after cutting it, her father expresses his disapproval and comments that she looks like a boy. In this context, the sing, where Bev drops her hair, ceases to signify just a sing and becomes a container for her deepest fears, the abuse from her father and the fear of maturation. But when the sink grabs her attention, it awakens those fears, and that's when the hair bursts from the drain, trapping her, and then an explosion of blood erupts, reminiscent of menstruation, or in other words, maturity. This is that, or the unconscious bringing forth fears and anxieties that a teenager might not know how to verbalize, based on the unexpected meaning linked to the scene. In Eddie's case, a simple alarm isn't just a reminder to take his medication. It reignites his deep fears of getting sick, being contagious, and being vulnerable. And that's when that, or the unconscious, manifests itself as a leper. And for Richie, the signifier of the clown doesn't connect directly to the painted white face, but to the latent fear of being forgotten, disappearing, facing the same fate. It reminds us, on one hand, that true horror often resides within ourselves and manifests through our insecurities, traumas, and personal fears. On the other hand, it shows us that terror doesn't always stem from the unknown, but from what is familiar to us. First, unlike other horror films that focus on specific and unchanging figures like nuns, demons, or monsters, it acts as a mirror, reflecting and amplifying the individual deep fears of each character based on their own experiences and traumas. This idea reveals that our fears don't only come from legends or external myths, but from real and personal situations. Fears like illness, death, the process of growing up, discrimination, and neglect from those who are supposed to care for us are very human fears. They are the fears that truly haunt us in our everyday lives. And second, it's not just a clown. The adults in Derry also often embody horror for the children. Characters like Beverly's parents, Stanley's parents, Billy Bowers, Eddie's mother, the inappropriate pharmacist, and those who show indifference in the face of danger, like the old woman with Georgie and the driver with Ben. In addition to the racist attitudes from the town, are all sources of terror for the kids. In the film, adults who should be protective figures are presented as abusive, neglectful, or deviant, suggesting to us that terror doesn't always stem from the supernatural. Finally, I want to close by revisiting a recurring idea in the film. The children cannot be defeated when they act together. First, this premise highlights the therapeutic power of social support and mutual assistance. From a psychological perspective, social backing is essential when confronting trauma and adversity. It's well known that isolation can intensify emotional distress, while having a support network can act as a buffer. When someone feels backed by others, they are more likely to see themselves as capable of facing their own fears and challenges, as we saw in the film. On the other hand, sharing fears and experiences can be therapeutic in itself, because by verbalizing and sharing with others, emotions are processed, and validation and understanding can be received. Essential elements for the healing. And second, the strength of the kids' union suggests that there is an inherent power in the bond between people, reinforcing the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Each child, with their own fears and traumas, coming together creates a united front, much stronger than any of them individually. This reminds us that it's not always necessary to be self-sufficient. In a society that often glorifies independence, it's easy to forget that it's okay and human to seek help. Mutual support, empathy, solidarity are essential resources for overcoming life's challenges. Thus, even in times when you feel your individual strength is wavering, you can find refuge, strength, and resilience in community and mutual support. Lucifer Warhand, and thank you for getting this far. Now I just ask that you please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what you think, what your biggest fear is, or which movie you'd like me to analyze next.